Rybak's request for his belt sets up this final scene in The Ascent, where he tries and fails to hang himself in a toilet. In Bykov's version, Rybak simply realizes he doesn't have a belt and has no means of hanging himself. The politsai named Stas in the novella credits Rybak with the hanging of Sotnikov. Bykov writes, I quote, "A chilling feeling of a kind of guilt touched his mind, but he still didn't want to believe that he had any part in the massacre. What had he done after all? Surely it wasn't him." End quote. Rybak looks at the empty cellar. Several commentators have suggested a parallel between the empty cellar and the empty tomb in all four of the Gospels, suggesting that Christ has risen from the dead. Just as Rybak's interrogation by Putinov follows Sotnikov's own interrogation, here Rybak's hanging follows that of Sotnikov. Unlike the interrogation, the outcome is very different. Whereas Shepitko presents Sotnikov's ascent to heaven with dignity and grace, Rybak's attempted suicide is both awkward and grotesque. While the spirit of Sotnikov lives on, at least in the mind of the young boy who witnessed his execution, Rybak remains firmly wedded to earthly matter, whether it be Portnoy's materialistic worldview, the hungry soldiers, or this attempted suicide in a place usually reserved for bowel movements. It was this metaphysical dimension that very nearly resulted in The Ascent getting shelved. However, Shepitko screened the film for the first secretary of the Belarusian Communist Party, Pyotr Mironovich Masherov. Masherov was himself a veteran, and according to accounts by Klimov, the screening had a profound effect on him. Yuri Klepikov, who authored the screenplay, insisted that it was Masherov's reaction that ensured the film was accepted for distribution by Goskino, the Russian state film agency, without changes. The international premiere of The Ascent was at the Berlinale. The jury included Ellen Burstyn, who cast the deciding vote, which resulted in Shepitko being awarded the Golden Bear. Burstyn remembers Shepitko as beautiful, intelligent, focused, and someone of high energy. After the Berlinale, Burstyn traveled to Moscow to meet Shepitko again. Shepitko was Burstyn's first choice to direct her in Silence of the North, which was based on Olive Fredrickson's semi-autobiographical novel about living in the Canadian wilderness at the turn of the last century. The success of the Berlinale resulted in screenings of The Ascent at various international film festivals. Thanks to Tom Luddy, Shepitko attended screenings of The Ascent at the Telluride Film Festival as well as the Pacific Film Archive. It was through Telluride that the avant-garde filmmaker Stan Brakhage got to see The Ascent and meet Shepitko in person. Jerry White has collected Brakhage's writings during the 1980s for Rolling Stock. In an article dating from 1981, Brakhage noted that Shepitko was the most important filmmaker he met through Telluride Film Festival. Her films, Brakhage wrote, are in league with those of Murnau. In his article Remembering Larisa, Tom Luddy recalled his dealings with Goskino when it came to organizing Shepitko's trip to both Telluride and the Pacific Film Archive. Brakhage subsequently wrote to Stella Pence, describing how Shepitko managed to shake off her Soviet minder to meet him before a screening of Carolee Schneemann's The Erotic Woman. According to Brakhage, for Shepitko, the discovery of the festival was his own film, The Governor, and that she wanted to invite him to the Soviet Union, something he confessed to being quite apprehensive about. Brakhage also reviewed Shepitko's adaptation of Andrei Platonov's Homeland of Electricity as part of a 1987 program of films which Klimov, in his capacity as head of the Soviet Filmmakers Union, had taken off the shelf and made available both in the Soviet Union and abroad. Besides his considerable and arguably underrated filmography, Klimov was also significant during the Gorbachev period for his efforts to make available such films as Alexei German's My Friend Ivan Lapshin and Tengiz Abaladzi's Repentance, titles that figured prominently in Glasnost. Despite the fact that both Shepitko and Klimov pursued their careers as filmmakers independently, it is impossible to talk about Klimov's films, particularly his later films, without acknowledging Shepitko. After completing his homage to Shepitko, Larisa, and Farewell, Klimov turned his attention to what would ultimately be his final film, Come and See. Both The Ascent and Come and See engage with two major Belarusian writers and intellectuals, Bykov and Adamovich, who became major dissident voices, first with the mishandling of the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, and secondly with the regime of Alexander Lukashenko, president of Belarus since 1994. In her essay Looking at War, Susan Sontag described The Ascent as, I quote, "the most affecting film about the sadness of war I know," end quote. If The Ascent is the definitive film about the sadness of war, then Come and See remains the definitive film about the horror of war. The power of both films remains undiminished, and they continue to influence filmmakers around the world.